11th of March. It is the day before filing day for the primary races here in Oregon. Tomorrow, the 12th at 5 p.m. is the deadline. And we are fortunate enough to have with us here the chair of the Oregon Young Republicans, or the Young Republicans of Oregon, right? Say it
Young
right.
Republicans of Oregon.
Stephen Lloyd. Welcome to the program, Stephen. How are you?
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Every time you give me a phone call and you ask me to hop on, I love the opportunity speaking with you. You're always so knowledgeable about everything we talk about, so it's a good time.
Well, and it's a bit of uh, a rat race to keep up with all of the stuff that's happening, but at the same time, it is amazing. I don't know how some people that don't really pay attention are able to stay on top of this stuff. Really, it is an issue for me, and I'm watching it all the time. But having said that, we've had quite a lot of eventful stuff happen. We've had a state legislative session that just ended here in Oregon with some historic changes. We've had a presidential primary race that's pretty much concluded now with a presumptive nominee at the national level and a change at the RNC at the same time. We've had a State of the Union address by the current uh, human Roomba in chief, Joe Biden, and a border that is just fallen apart. And he talked about it in his speech, but he said all the wrong things, and that's on top of the stories, the sleeper stories that sneak through, like how much your electrical rates are going to go up, and why.
Again, go up again.
Go up again. Yeah, that's right. And not down, because that's the one thing they say, well, inflation's gone down. Well, inflation slowing down slightly doesn't mean prices have gone down and that you can now afford things better. They're just increasing at a less steep rate. And then there's protesters like running around here in Portland blocking highways. And that's on top of the news about a TikTok ban, which, where do we start? Why don't we start with the presidential stuff and kind of work our way through it?
Yeah, absolutely. I If we want to kick it right off, I just have to say that I'm happy that Nikki Haley has finally decided to kind of see the writing on the wall. She won like one or two different states,
Yeah.
and it was like DC and New Hampshire, something like that.
Washington, D.C. and Vermont. Vermont.
Well, let's talk about Vermont for 2 seconds. I
Yeah.
feel like this whole primary process has kind of been a little tainted.
Yeah.
Um, if you looked at Iowa, there was an unprecedented amount of people that were actually changing their party affiliation weeks before the election down there so that they could take part in it. And some people believed that it was actually kind of a stratagem in order to try and get a more moderate um, to be the Republican nominee. But we see that it failed. And I have to tell you, Vermont being one of the most progressive, liberal, socialist states in the country, openly so. The home of Bernie Sanders. I think it only goes to show the people that you're gonna ask to represent you is Nikki Haley. So
Well, there was something interesting about the exit polling in Vermont, which was that even though she won, and it was very tight, actually, it was like a 50-50, and she got slightly more, but of her votes, half the people in the exit polling said that they were voting for Joe Biden in the general anyway.
yeah,
So they were, and of course, they weren't Republicans voting for Joe Biden. They were people who could choose to vote in pick a ballot in either party primary and then just vote that. And so they were just, hardcore Democrats who had no reason, by the way, to vote in the Democrat primary unless they were trying to make sure that they could marginalize the uncommitted votes that were being cast essentially against Joe Biden in those races, because there was no real race going on on the other side. And so those people said, well, Joe Biden's going to be the nominee anyway. Why don't we go cast a protest vote in the Republican primary? And that's the only reason why Vermont happened the way it did.
That's really interesting because, I know a few years ago, the Republican Party was talking about doing an open primary in the past.
Yep.
And then I've also heard recently in the rumor mill that there are people that are trying to get it passed to where we can do open primaries across the board for all races, which is just kind of interesting. And I kind of wonder what the strategy is to that.
Well, so I believe that the ballot initiative to do that here in Oregon cratered, and they've stopped gathering signatures. And so that was news last week, I remember.
Oh.
However, there are people constantly trying to do that. There's also a ballot initiative that is going to be called Star Voting, where they also try to, in effect, eliminate the primaries, or the way we know things to function, where you have they want to make it so that you vote for multiple people, your first, second, third, and fourth preference. And then voters not only can't figure it out, but only machines can count it, because we trust machines completely. And so they're trying to reform the election system, but I think that's to deform the election system and to take the plummeting trust that people have in the outcomes of some of these elections and literally throw it straight into the toilet.
Right.
Which is, I know in the state of Illinois, their clerks all over the state of Illinois are afraid that they're going to implement ranked choice voting there. So you're right. Other states, they have they have various varieties of open primaries. Some where you have hard party registration, like we do, but then there's people who are not registered with either party. That was the proposal a couple of years ago. It was defeated, and it was an attempt to just do it within one race, within one primary election season in Oregon for governor. But other states, they don't have hard party registration. So people can they're assumed to be Democrats or Republicans based on which primary they voted in 2 years ago. But that's the only way you actually know who considers themselves to be a member of one party or another. And they can just, at the last minute, just decide, I think I'll vote in the Republican primary instead of the Democrat. And that happens in a lot of different states. And those states are expected to favor Nikki Haley. That was her big, Super Tuesday belief that I think 12 of the 15 states that were up that night have that ability for voters to choose. But it didn't pan out, because the wins ranged from like 40% margin Trump over Haley to even larger, more lopsided.
And to be brutally honest with you, Kevin, I kind of feel like Haley was one of these people that was she was running specifically because she felt like Trump was going to be indicted and he was going to be thrown in jail, and then she would win by default. I really believe in my heart of hearts that's what she was hoping for, so that she didn't have to spend a bunch of money campaigning through the primary. But it didn't happen. The Supreme Court ruled that I believe it's the Congress can determine who is an insurrectionist, and until today they haven't done anything with it yet. So
yeah, they haven't written statutes that make it possible to determine that without actually being tried and convicted of it, which hasn't happened with anybody. And frankly, I think sometimes the argument has been stronger based on some of the issues we're going to talk about here tonight for Joe Biden maybe checking that box. But hey, that's just, speculation, wild speculation. Speaking of wild speculation, well, first of all, we have a new RNC chair and co-chair. This is often done in deference to an incumbent president, that the incumbent president chooses the chair and the co-chair. In this case, it's sort of a mix, right? You've got Michael Whatley, who is the chair, or was the chair of, I believe, is it South Carolina?
South Carolina. Yep.
Yeah. And he was nominated by President Trump to take over from Ronna McDaniel. hopefully the fundraising is going to recover, because I know that's one of the things they're really concerned about, was will it be able to turn around the ship, because you got to have a lot of money to win these races at every level, including the whole get out the vote operation. So it's going to have to swing significantly into high caliber donations and fundraising to produce an outcome that people want to see here in the general election. And then the co-chair is Laura Trump, who I think we can pretty easily figure out had something to do with President Trump in that one.
I think she might be related. Yeah. So I'm actually not concerned about it at all. I think that this is one of the most exciting things that has happened for RNC leadership in a long, long time. I think that from a grassrootsy guy like myself, I've always had issues with the way that the RNC at the highest level have decided to do things, and I feel like what's going to happen is they're firmly behind Trump. Obviously, Trump gets butts and seats. Trump gets donations coming in like gangbusters, and if there's one thing that Trump can do, he can raise a ton of money. And if you fold in the RNC, the ability of every single state out there, every single county out there to be able to be motivated and kind of a switch flipped to really, really work for this next presidential election, which it should, then potentially we could see an absolute avalanche of support for our presidential nominee.
Well, and I'm trying to find the article here, but I basically President Trump, out of the, I believe, 6 swing states that determined the last presidential election. So we're talking Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, and I'm forgetting one, I think. And so I believe out of those states, it should be 6 of them. I'm just not sure. I think I only counted 5 there. So Wisconsin, Nevada, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona. 6. Out of those 6 states, 5 of them are being won by President Trump with a decent margin, actually.
Are you talking about the polling wise?
Yeah, polling. In terms of polling. And one of them is a statistical tie. And which means that it's catastrophic. It's going to be an electoral landslide for Trump, and we know that's if we were voting today. But that's not a good place to start if you're the Democrat, because don't forget, the Democrats never led. Sorry, the Republicans never led in a poll in 2019 or 2020. Leading up to the general election, which was obviously very close.
Well, and I'm really, to be honest, if we take a pull back a little bit, I'm just blown away that people are so in support of President Biden at this point anyways. I mean, with the way that our country currently is, the economy, the inflation, the border, foreign policy, mental health, all of these different things, anyone should be polling above him, and President Trump should be head and shoulders above that. I mean, we should be winning by 10, 15, 20 points in all of these states. If I think people were being honest about Biden's
how bad Biden is. Yeah, no, I know. I don't know how anybody with a straight face defends what Biden's doing. They literally have to have an intravenous Kool-Aid thing going straight into their veins, like, yeah, everything's fine at the border. I heard that from Joe Biden, and just insane assumptions. And this is in the midst of unprecedented efforts by the Democrats, not only, as you said, to get him removed from various state ballots, which has been knocked down by the Supreme Court 9-0, but also they were doing everything they could to create issues that turns out that they've fabricated. So this is the latest thing. Is there was a witness in the January 6th committee that the Democrats ran and only allowed Republicans who agreed with them, who were essentially turncoats, to be on that committee instead of letting the minority leader at the time, Kevin McCarthy, name people to that committee. Well, it turns out that they spiked some information. They actually withheld crucial evidence.
And if this would have been a criminal court case, then it would have gotten thrown out because of that.
Not only that, the people who withheld the evidence would have been facing disbarment and possibly criminal charges.
Yep, absolutely.
And so this is how serious it is. And yet this is called Monday for the Democrats in terms of the stuff that they do all the time. This is just another day. And that's
just like pulling a fire alarm.
Yes, it is. Somebody did that, I think. And of course, getting away with it is the other thing. By the way, did you see Senator Menendez, the New Jersey Democrat senator? He has 12 more charges against him.
Ugh.
You know what?
That's a lot of fire.
They haven't called for him to step down. It seems like the calls for him to immediately step down by Democrats not happening.
Right. Right. Well, can I make a quick comment going back to the primary real quick?
Yeah.
Why didn't Biden did Biden run for the Iowa caucus?
So I think he wasn't on the ballot in New Hampshire. And I think also he wasn't going to be on the ballot in Iowa, but it was New Hampshire where he wasn't actually on the ballot. So what they did is they ran a write-in campaign because they had moved the South Carolina primary to favor him, because the South Carolina primary is the one that helped him 4 years ago surpass the other competitors in the Democrat field and become the presumptive nominee shortly thereafter. But it was this thing where they stuck it to Iowa and New Hampshire, and it turns out Iowa and New Hampshire didn't really like that, so they moved their stuff up too. And Biden was trying to comply with what it's just a total cluster. Everything the DNC has done this year has just been a total disaster.
But my question of it is it unprecedented that a president is not running in Iowa or wasn't voted on in Iowa? Because I was always under the impression that this was the big show. Everybody goes out to Iowa. Everybody works their tail off. Everybody does that stuff. But this election, I feel like, nope, we're ordaining Biden as the nominee. We don't give a hoot of what our members. You will do what we tell you to do. You will vote for who we tell you to vote for.
Well, and I think actually it does have something to do with that they wrote the DNC rules so that it was pretty easy for state by state, to say, well, we don't really have anybody running against President Biden. Go ahead and show up and vote, but there's no competitors. And so they did that with RFK Jr., which is why he left the Democrat Party, and he's sort of wandering in the wilderness now. And then there's a couple of other people that were still in some states, they weren't even allowed to be on the ballot.
Yeah, that's
and
crazy.
That does not demonstrate strength for Joe Biden.
It demonstrates fear.
Yeah, which is actually probably justified, fear of imminent failure. And that's what they're hurtling towards that. But yeah, the stuff that happened around January 6th is just another thing that they've been trying to do that it's not working. And actually it's blowing up in their faces because they're lies. And then you've got the way they tried to rig the primary system so that no viable Democrat competitor could run and potentially win one of these states. And that's something you do when it's not that unusual for them to have sort of a predetermined primary process when there's an incumbent who's strong and appearing capable of completing another 4-year term, winning and completing it. A majority of Democrats, as I understand it now in polling, actually don't think he can do it. And so they're going to still vote for him because they still hate President Trump that much. But when do I think there's a problem. when people hate President Trump more than they love the country. And or maybe they think there's just no cost to being this idiotic. Now, there's been some other news in this past week, which is really interesting. Speaking of Joe Biden, he gave his State of the Union speech, and this is in the midst of a complete breakdown in what's happening at the border. There was news that they've actually flown straight from South American countries. Anybody who uses an app that's put out by the Customs and Border Patrol, they use this app and they can just get on a plane and fly into the United States. And they've done that with 320,000 people.
Could you put that link down below? I would love to be able to get some free airfare because right now it's very expensive.
Yeah.
And now we know why, because all those seats are filled with illegal immigrants coming to our country.
Well, and the weirdest thing is, even though this was forced to be revealed by a Freedom of Information Act request, it was not disclosed to Congress in this way, but they actually won't show where all of these people landed, which is interesting because they're still covering that information up because apparently it's some security risk that they have so many people they don't know who they are. Unidentified people are flowing into certain airports they're insecure areas of airports.
Yep.
They can be terrorists, and they have no security. They don't even have the ability to control whether or not those people would just get up and leave the airport either.
Yeah.
And so they don't want anyone to know what's happening.
Well, I was listening to a House meeting Jim Jordan was putting on, and he was talking about the fact that that this app, like you're talking about, these individuals, they get free airfare, and they were going from New York City, and they were flying to the West Coast. And what was going on is that these women were being trafficked. And so there was they actually came out, and there was like 30 people that they had investigated, that they have evidence on, that they have basically that they're currently being charged right now with all of this human trafficking. These women were sold into sex slavery, and it was to cover costs for immigration, and it was for their livelihoods and everything else. And unfortunately, when you have unfettered illegal immigration, that's what happens. These desperate people do desperate things in order to just try to survive, and that's not the way that the process should be. It should be clear and transparent so that everybody is treated equally, everybody's treated fairly, and no one is getting taken advantage like this. And unfortunately, that's exactly what's happening. It's happening to women, it's happening to children, it's happening to anybody that the cartels or these human peddlers can get their hands on. And it is a humanitarian disaster, and one that's purely and simply done by the policies of this government. And it genuinely hurts my heart for these people. It really, really does.
Well, and I think that there's a problem when you can't get a straight answer. Now, I just did a search on this because I know I've seen multiple articles type. The most recent one that I saw was one in which Congress is seeking more information about this. I put in Congress seeking more information about this, and the search engine, in this case, DuckDuckGo. So I don't know, DuckDuckGo might have to go here. It shows nothing but fact check corrections from the Biden administration. That's all you can get. The only article that ironically somehow slipped through their filter is that there's a program that allows 30,000 migrants from 4 countries into the U.S. each month was upheld by a judge. So the program that these fact checkers are saying don't exist and are not true has just been upheld by a judge in the same set of reports.
I don't understand how these judges supersede American sovereignty. Our borders are not borders, so therefore we don't have a country at all. I mean, judges cannot rule away our rights, our land, our country.
You'd think, but in the end, if judges let them get away with it and it's happening at that rate a month, then I don't know, do the math. 30,000 times 12 is 360,000. The program allows that. And then they're saying, but they're not really doing that. Well, they shouldn't be doing it at all.
No. No, well, I don't know if you've seen some of the interviews with New Yorkers, but New Yorkers are very mad. to be very nice about it, they're very, very mad, and they're saying, why are we allowing all of these immigrants? These immigrants come to our country, getting free phones, getting free money, getting free housing. They're literally taking children out of schools so that they can put immigrants in the schools for a temporary place to shelter them. These kids aren't going to school. Why are we prioritizing anyone over American citizens first? It doesn't make any sense why Americans have to starve or freeze to death on the street, or even go without a meal before anyone else coming in gets something before them.
Well, Joe Biden wanted to send a message with his State of the Union speech because apparently the U in State of the Union is actually stood for Ukraine, because he spent the first 10 minutes of his speech not talking about the United States, but talking about Ukraine. Now, I think various reasonable people can debate and disagree about whether or not we have the right policy, that we even have a policy that is intended to succeed in what we're doing with Ukraine. Also, I think that there's clearly been an attack on that country, not one that was done with the permission of the people of Ukraine. But that's not the most important thing happening for the United States. It's our border, not the Ukrainian border, that should be at the top of our list. And yet, here's what the top headline, as far as progressives are concerned, that came out of the State of the Union speech. They were angry that Joe Biden on Thursday used the word illegal to describe the person who illegally entered the United States, then committed various crimes that brought him into contact with law enforcement. Nobody did anything about it. And then he bashed in the head of Laken Riley and murdered her, allegedly. And instead of the progressives being concerned about Laken Riley, they were concerned about the fact that he used the word illegal and apparently offended a murderer. So they were living.
I've never been concerned about offending somebody like that, and our president shouldn't. And I think we all have a choice come this next November. You've got a choice too. You can choose between a man who's going to be shivering in his boots, his comfortable tennis shoes because he can't wear regular shoes anymore. I don't know if you saw that, or a president that will stand up for the American people. And I'll vote for him all day long.
Well, Joe Biden's response to this criticism from progressives wasn't to tell them, whatever, get lost, but to apologize to the murderer.
Yeah.
He should be apologizing to Laken Riley's devastated mother and father and that entire community. They actually thought that they were living in Athens, Georgia. They were living in an idyllic, safe neighborhood. She goes for a jog. She gets her head bashed in. And this guy wasn't just somebody who encountered law enforcement once or twice, but several times along the way, including, of course, the Border Patrol itself. And nothing was done. So he has blood on his hands. And he is instead apologizing to the murderer. Elon Musk is calling this out because he's actually saying, look, we have a real national security problem here. There is going to be, he said it's inevitable that there's going to be a terrorist attack that comes into the United States across that southern border, because there's absolutely nothing being done to prevent that from happening.
Well, and we talked about it before, but I genuinely feel like these types of incidents are specific. It almost seems intentional to me. I mean, you look at the situation over in Ireland where they have a massive immigrant population move into these very, very conservative Irish neighborhoods. And there was a stabbing that happened in the school the people were overwhelmed with passion and anger about the situation, and they torched I think it was an immigration services building there,
Yeah.
and they were really really upset about it. So what the Irish government did is they threw it into overdrive, and they passed a bunch of hate crime laws and anti-bullying where basically they can just sweep you up in the middle of the night and you're going to be thrown in jail for X amount of years. And I don't know if you're an MMA guy, but what's his name? The Irish fighter there, Colin McGregor. He would basically said, that it was wrong. It was wrong of the Irish government to do what they did, and he said a little bit more fiery things. But basically, there's a potential that Colin McGregor, an MMA fighter, is going to be swept up if he ever goes back to Ireland for bullying.
Bullying, yeah, because letting dangerous immigrants into a country illegally, that's okay. But saying bad things about them,
No, just saying that it was wrong for the Irish government to do that.
yeah,
That's bullying to those people. And I have to say, stabbing children, all of the people that were involved in that heinous act, those people not only need to serve time and to
look,
they need to rectify that
the
situation.
entire thing was caused by the knives themselves. It wasn't caused by people. It's knife violence, and that's why we got to make sure that we do everything we can to rid the world of dangerous knives, because that's what caused it. I am, of course, being facetious and making fun of the fact that every time somebody gets shot by a heinous criminal, that we blame the gun and disarm law-abiding citizens who are the only ones left to defend themselves against the heinous criminal, who will use an illegal gun, by the way, anyway.
Well, I'm really happy you brought it up, and I'm going to go on a tangent here, just for 2 seconds, because it's
could I
not
mention
on our show notes.
quick on that tangent? You were right that it's intentional. I posted in the feed. Elon Musk points out how you can do a 5-point percentage shift in the electorate towards Democrat states and districts by letting people flood in illegally into the country because they still got counted in the census. And the effort to stop that from happening actually failed in Congress. Go.
So the tangent that I want to go on is the Supreme Court has been making a lot of motion, a lot of hubbub on the Second Amendment front. They've been doing a lot of good things. A lot of other things are on the docket as well. They could go either way. But one of the things that they're talking about specifically is the bump stock ban. And it was really, really interesting to hear our Supreme Court justices basically listen to experts from the ATF, and then other individuals. And it was really, really interesting to hear Supreme Court justices who are very, very intelligent. All of them are brilliant legal scholars, but they just couldn't understand the difference between a semi-automatic firearm and a fully automatic firearm. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. But at the end of the day, I really wish that somebody would just go out and take the Supreme Court justices out on the rifle range and teach them what the difference is between a machine gun and just a regular old semi-auto. I think that it would illuminate the conversation for them. But ultimately, it's so interesting that the Supreme Court is going to be trying to give the ATF or take away the ATF's ability to regulate accessories.
No, there's a lot at stake. A lot is happening, and we get drawn by this sparkly flashing lights of the headlines. But while we're talking about the border, the FBI director, who I don't really have a lot of respect for because of what he allowed to go on in his agency, but he does see information we don't see. And if he says this, I don't think he's making it up. He said that the southern border smuggling networks have ISIS ties. So the very terrorist group that President Trump crushed in Syria and Iraq and pretty much wound that up, and we went back to having peace. Remember that 4 years ago, peace? and security and safety and dead terrorists. Apparently, ISIS has got a chance of making a comeback. And Marco Rubio was asking him about this. And he said, from the FBI perspective, we are seeing a wide array of very dangerous threats that emanate from the border. That includes everything from drug trafficking from drug trafficking that's just on the fentanyl side. There's also a lot of violent crime at the hands of gangs involved in this distribution. And he says, I want to be a little careful in the open session, but there's a particular network that where some of the overseas facilitators of the smuggling network have ISIS ties that we're very concerned about. So Joe Biden isn't listening to anybody in the government who can tell him that his southern border policy is going to lead to dead people. It already is, because there's 110,000 Americans dying from fentanyl overdoses.
Yep.
And now we're going to have terrorists, and we're wide open. I mean, you're going to defend a venue, a college football stadium venue, from a handful of terrorists that decided to come across the southern border undetected? No. So this is where we're at. Elon Musk called it out. The FBI director has admitted it. And what we have is members of Congress who still can't bring themselves to vote, in the case of the Laken Riley thing, to simply eliminate the future possibility that we could have more Laken Rileys, by saying that when somebody breaks the law, they're gone, that we should deport them. We have sanctuary cities that apparently right now get away with the idea of taking people who commit serious crimes and letting them commit serious crimes as much as they want without facing deportation. And
that sounds like aiding and abetting our enemy. That's what it sounds like to me.
It's pretty much what it is. And so one of them is Val Hoyle in the 4th district. Another is Andrea Salinas in the 6th district. They're the current congresswoman from those 2 districts in Oregon. And what's significant about this is that it's received scant attention, but it is becoming a factor in the elections that are going on. And Laken Riley's mom just scorched President Biden for what he said and did, got her daughter's name wrong. The only thing Biden did right, he apologized for a few days later, which was calling the murder illegal. But in the case of the 4th district, Monique Despain, the Republican candidate in the primary there, who went after Val Hoyle and pummeled her for voting against House Resolution 7511, the Laken Riley Act, which is a bipartisan bill supported by 37 Democrats that would have required immigration and customs enforcement to arrest illegal migrants who commit crimes in the United States, require them to do it. And of course, under the Take Care Clause, that could be compelled in the Constitution. The president must do it. And but Val Hoyle could not bring herself to vote in favor of this act. And she's...
What are they afraid of?
What's that?
What are they afraid of? That they're not going to get the illegal immigrant vote? Is that what they're concerned of?
It's I don't believe that Val Hoyle has explained it. Apparently, she just has lockstep rubber stamp allegiance to whatever the leadership is telling her to do. And the leadership of the Democrat caucus in Washington, D.C. in the House is completely on the left.
But how does that benefit the Democrats? How does propping up criminal immigrants coming over, committing heinous crimes, and them just refusing to arrest these people and
because if you watch the news that a lot of Democrats watch, you will only hear how President Biden said the word illegal and then apologized for it. You won't even hear any details about Laken Riley, which is just one unfortunate incident. And remember, Biden, during his State of the Union speech, tried to say, well, so how many, he even screwed it up, but how many people have been killed by legal immigrants in the United States? People who are legal. And it's like, so that makes it okay. I mean, this is the dumbest thing you've ever heard, but this is where we're at. And the thing is, we could actually change this in Oregon because we could, send Andrea Salinas, who's one of them, packing. We could send Val Hoyle packing, and we could replace them with people, in this case, like Monique Despain, who has been very clear that she is that if we get rid of these career politicians who do what their special interest masters in Washington, D.C. tell them to do, and the special interests are the ones that are running this illegal migrant industrial complex. They call them nonprofits. They've got all kinds of people raking in dough, moving these people into our cities, spending not billions, not tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars doing this, flooding cities that don't have any resources to deal with it. And as you said, why would that be good for the Democrats? Well, if voters don't know, I think what's happening is it's getting to the point where they figure they just got to flood as many as they can in, knowing that we probably won't be able to send them all out. And then they'll turn into people counted in the census.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a mess. It's a mess because we can't turn a blind eye to it, but often people do. They turn a blind eye to the fact that there are people voting in Congress for these things.
I'm really concerned. I'm concerned when it comes to these policies. Do we as Americans have the stomach to rectify the situation, and what does that mean? Obviously, we want to secure our border, but I'm under the impression that we have almost 7 million people who crossed the border just under President Biden's
It's now exceeding 8 million. The backlog of people who have been processed. These are the ones they've actually processed. Then there's the gotaways who are carrying fentanyl or trafficking people or members of MS-13 and different gangs. But 8 million of them are literally in a queue waiting for a court date that they don't plan to show up for in order to supposedly have their case heard.
So with that being said, let's say that we have 10 million people in our country illegally. State of Oregon's what, like 7.5 million people?
Oh, yeah.
And so if you think about
Oregon's 4 million.
4 million people.
Washington State's about twice that at about 8. And yeah, so it exceeds the size of 2 of the states here in the Northwest.
So with that being said, I mean, I have a hard time seeing what we could possibly do in this situation. I mean, mass deportation is nothing anybody really wants to talk about, but securing the border at the very minimum. But we can't afford an additional 8 million mouths to feed, 8 million houses or houses to build.
Yeah, that's right.
Million, and currently with the economy the way that it is, currently with everything the way that it is, it's just so untenable.
It is untenable. And yet where we're at is that the media, a good chunk of the media, doesn't talk about this at all. No. And that's the way they get away with it. That's how I think they get away with it. Now, we do have, and I posted several more links. There's a video. I mean, everybody who follows this show should be sharing this with people, because you're going to encounter people that don't know this information and they don't know who to vote for. And they'll just go with the last mail piece or the last TV ad that's run and not know that it's actually our job as voters to hold these people accountable. I did want to give a little hat tip before we go into any of the topics, which is that the young Republicans have taken up the job of making sure that people know who Republican candidates are, that you guys have gone to the trouble of doing surveys and then evaluating. And then as a group, you got together and selected people that you've endorsed. Could you tell us a little bit about that so people know? And if they want to, by the way, if you want other people who are young Republicans, which is anything from the age of 18 to 39, right?
18 to 40. You can get in there 40.
Okay.
So
I'm well beyond that, but yeah.
Oh, You wouldn't know by a day. You wouldn't know by a day. So the Young Republicans, we did a big endorsement process for this election coming up. We wanted to make sure that Oregonians all across the state here could kind of see what some of the candidates that the Young Republicans were interested in endorsing. The process was very similar to what Kevin was saying. So we sent out a bunch of questionnaires for them to answer, and unfortunately, not all of the candidates returned them. And so, if you don't see your candidate endorsed by the Young Republicans, give them a little elbow and say, "Hey, why don't you fill out that questionnaire and see if you can get an endorsement the next time around." But we're going to be putting together a voter guide, and we'll be look forward to that on all of your favorite social media outlets. But we're very, very impressed by all of the individuals who are willing to put their name out there, willing to serve their community, represent their community. And if you guys have any questions, if you guys are interested to see if your candidate is endorsed by the Young Republicans of Oregon, go ahead and look on our social media, and we've got a nice big list for you over there.
So yes, I will post all of the social media links here as we're talking, because there's the Young Republicans of Oregon. So YRO.GOP is one place they can go. I believe you've got a page that says our endorsements, and so you're probably going to be posting something there. I'll post that link directly here.
Thank you so much.
And I happen to know one of the candidates you endorsed is Monique Despain. That's what kind of helped me remember that, because as you said, some candidates went to the trouble to fill out the survey and then be evaluated, and this is going to carry weight in a Republican primary, and I think that's where we're at right now.
Well, I sure hope. And in addition to that, if you're a county chairman, chairwoman out there, go out there and try to get this endorsement process set up so that more people can find out more information. This is a great way to kind of test the waters and see who your candidates are. In addition, it's a great opportunity for them to come and speak with your county chapter. So this endorsement process is a benefit for them. It's a benefit for you. It's a win-win for everybody involved. And the most important thing is, if your PCPs or if you as an individual find out, I like the Young Republicans. Young Republicans are endorsing this person, I should check them out. Maybe it's an opportunity for you to get to know your candidates just a little bit more. And if you feel passionate enough, I know that they're looking for volunteers. So go out there, volunteer. You can always help by endorsing them yourself, giving them money and donations. Or if you don't have any money, like us Young Republicans, then you can always volunteer your time. It's just as, if not more valuable to help out the candidates win.
And a lot of these candidates deeply appreciate the support. We know that also when it comes to donations, the Democrats get a lot of their media for free, especially from the traditional mainstream media. And Republicans, in the end, usually have to pay for it. Every once in a while, we get lucky and we get newsworthy and we get covered. But for the most part, we're going to have a war chest, and we're going to have to go out. I mean, the TV stations do not give you stuff for free. They don't let you come on for free. The post office doesn't give you free postage. The printers don't print things for free. And then, of course, we have to have armies of people. In addition to our volunteers, we often have to pay armies of people to go and cover every square inch of territory where we need to get out the vote and get out the word. And that costs money too. It costs more money than it ever has, because, as we know, the minimum wage has been raised, and there's a shortage of people that you can find to do this. So it costs more money, but yet our republic depends on it.
It absolutely does. And I genuinely believe that the hard work, the determination, those hours that you volunteer to your community to go out and to work for these candidates, if you can invest that time, because I truly believe it's an investment, it will save us more time at our jobs, and more tax dollars in our pockets, and just, I mean, literally our rights and our lives are on the line because we've got presidents where we've got adversaries on all ends, and if we vote the right people in, maybe we don't have to fight those enemies up
Yeah.
front because
Bet on your country
yeah,
to win by
yeah,
betting on the people that can actually make that difference. And we have a lot of good folks standing forward who, by the way, have to turn their lives upside down. They have to
yeah,
do, they usually have to take a hit in terms of their personal income. They also have to go out and ask people for money. In the case of these federal races, they have to ask for millions of dollars in tiny little multi-thousand-dollar chunks. So there's people working constantly to do this. And what can you do? Make it one donation easier for them.
yep,
Show up when they need you. Take a sign when they're available. There's a way to make a difference, and it's a do-it-yourself country. That's what I always tell people. I've had to give this speech a number of times to groups of grassroots volunteers, and I'm like, this isn't a country where it was founded by people who said, it should be great if we had independence. Well, I sure hope some of those people over there do something about it. That's not how it was. It was people rolling up their sleeve and saying, I'm going to change this. And then they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. And all we're asked is maybe not a fortune, but something that we can do, and maybe some of our time. And a lot of those guys that did that for the Declaration of Independence, they did end up actually sacrificing those things. I think some 80% of them actually either died, families were killed, lost their property, left penniless as a result of signing a document saying that they wanted to be free of a tyrant. We don't even have to sacrifice that much, but we have far more to gain than those guys did even then. So I hope we do that. Shifting back to some of the news here, there's been some interesting things going on in the state of Oregon. First of all, these are all reflections of stuff happening at the national level, but protesters have been blocking Interstate 405 traffic on the Fremont Bridge. That's not even safe to be up there as a pedestrian on the Fremont Bridge. You can easily just get blown off the bridge. It's not really a great, but they're doing it. And the police say they know who they are. You're in the Portland metro area. I'm in the Portland metro area. What do you think about this?
So first and foremost, the natural habitat for a pedestrian is not on an interstate bridge. They're putting their lives in danger. They're putting other people's lives in danger. You have the right to protest. You don't have the right to protest in the motorway. It is not a protest at that point. It is a crime. I
Yeah.
wish that my Portland Police Bureau would enforce that. And if they need paddy wagons, I support raising the funds in order to arrest every protester who decides to step off into the roadway to cause a dangerous environment. There is nothing that you're not getting your word out by blocking traffic. All you're doing is causing an impediment to potentially an ambulance trying to deliver a pregnant woman to the hospital, or somebody who's critically injured or wounded. All you're doing is causing chaos. And if that's your goal, causing chaos for political ends is an act of terrorism.
Yeah, and they don't have a right to delay you getting to the airport and making you miss your flight. That's what's really awful about this, is that it's just a callous disregard for other people. They can have their voices heard, and they will be covered by the media. They always are.
Mm-hmm.
They do not need to go and damage the livelihoods of people just trying to live their lives on a daily basis.
And as a Republican, a proud Republican, I will always fight for your right to protest legally.
Yes.
When you do it illegally, I will always fight for you to be held to the fullest extent of the law.
So there's some other interesting news that's happening here in the state. Power rates are going to go up. And there was a good article that everybody should take a look at from PGE talking about PGE raising the rates. If approved by the Public Utilities Commission, it would add up to about a 40% increase in
Yeah.
power rates since January of 2022. Notice that's well within the Biden administration's time period. And Pacific Power Company customers, if the utility's latest rate is approved, that's a 50% increase since January of 2023.
How can they justify it, Kevin?
Well, so to a great extent, and Idaho Power, by the way, would be a 27% increase. So it's not just here in Oregon. But the fact is, it's not price gouging by the public utilities. It is all the costs of what they have to do to generate electricity and all of these stupid projects that they've forced on them to go and generate electricity using unsustainable, unaffordable means that's unreliable. That's all coming. What is it? All of our chickens are coming to roost, or whatever that old saying that was used by Obama's preacher. And this is a damaging to low-income Oregonians the most. Just like all other forms of inflation, the people who can least afford to have their power costs increased by 50% are people on fixed incomes and low-income individuals who will never see a 40% increase in their income since January of 22 or a 50% since January of 23. This is a human-caused disaster.
I'm sorry, but I still cannot understand the justification for the state of Oregon, because we get close to 80% of our clean, renewable power from hydroelectric. It's
lucky. Actually about 40%.
Oh, is it 40?
40. And they're taking down dams because the geniuses that are overseeing our power generation resources in this state, those geniuses have decided that it's better because gravity and water are not renewable. And then they are busy trying to force people to accept offshore electric generating windmills that will be tethered to the ocean floor and damage fishing and harm wildlife.
Yep. It'll kill whales. It'll kill whales. So if you love whales, then these offshore windmills, it's going to kill them. And I'm sorry, but windmills, from an engineering standpoint, they're about 30% efficient. Our hydroelectric is way more efficient, way safer, way better for the environment.
Yeah, it should be what we could count on for a lot. And that's why companies actually have located data centers here, is when they know they can access that. But it's being curtailed. It's actually being reduced by the Democrats running the state, because they don't consider it renewable energy source. And they believe that it'll harm fish, which the evidence of that is also not there. So this is the thing, is that if you let idiots run the state, eventually it's going to cost you an enormous amount of money, and maybe leave you like many people were during the recent ice storms, where they, by the way, had to spend a gazillion dollars repairing the power lines that went down. You won't have power, and you will find out what it's like to live in a third world country. We're going third world, as a friend of mine likes to say.
And the thing about that is, it only causes way more issues, because when these power outages happen, the people in Texas, a lot of them cranked up their wood stove that they didn't do the maintenance on or whatever. There were people that were literally doing burn barrels out in their front yard, and it was lighting homes on fire just because they were trying to keep warm in Texas. And you know what? That's coming to Oregon if they do the same stuff that they did in Texas.
That's right. No, that's exactly right. And then on top of that, the same leftists were trying to ban natural gas hookups in places like Eugene, thinking that they're actually going to help the environment, when in fact they would have deprived people in Eugene and Springfield of the one source of heating and cooking that they still had when the entire grid went down. We're going to see a lot more brownouts and blackouts in the future. And you know what they're also doing? While we're all paying attention to all these other things, the Securities and Exchange Commission is implementing a set of stringent provisions that will force companies to go and report and adhere to what's called ESG requirements, which are to force people to comply with climate change policies by talking about every last detail about how they and their entire supply chain produces carbon dioxide, and then so they can regulate it, all the greenhouse gases. It was passed by a narrow 3-2 vote. There was an enormous amount of comments against doing this, and they did it anyway. And you don't know that, and you won't feel it until later, when some of these companies that you thought, I thought it was their job to make sure we had electricity. Well, apparently not if they don't invest in it.
Well, and here's something really brief about it. The S in ESG stands for the social aspect of
So the woke stuff too.
yeah, the woke stuff. And basically what they want is they want a requirement that your employees volunteer a certain amount of time. And I don't know if it's supposed to be on the clock time. So are you funding a woke agenda at your workplace? Is that what you got into business for? I think not.
Yep.
That's
it's
not
compulsory. It's compulsory volunteering,
well,
which is an oxymoron to say at any rate. But yeah, you're right. And they're going to do it because they're going to say, well, it's a condition of your employment because it's forced on us by the Security and Exchange Commission.
and you know what this is? That's the political commissar that in the Soviet Union they placed at every single workplace. You will have a health and safety officer. You will have a political. I mean, this ESI, is that what it's called?
ESG.
ESG, an ESG compliance officer. We're getting into a wild, woolly world there, Kevin.
We are. Well, there is a couple of pieces of good news that we can end up with here. This is a good article in the Oregon Catalyst. Tina Kotek and Oregon lawmakers, controlled by Democrats, voted to roll back liberalism. The Measure 110 drug experiment and the recriminalization passed, and it actually has some teeth to it. It's not as bad as the original proposals they had. ABC News has actually done a special talking about the failure here in Oregon, and it's a good report, believe it or not.
I really hope that it teaches other states that they don't need to run this experiment again that led to the loss of thousands of lives in Oregon.
And then there's also a reversal of the land use bureaucracy, which has actually created the housing crisis, the shortage that exists, which everybody knows they want to spend $1 zillion to fix. So that the government causes the problem, then they fix the problem with $1 zillion and raise your taxes. Loser, all of us. And lastly, the story I thought was really good for a young Republican to talk about is the fact that Joe Biden has actually said that he will sign a ban of TikTok if Congress passes the legislation. Ironically enough, the Biden campaign announced that they're going to use TikTok to get the word out about Joe Biden. And he's also on the, I mean, he's like, this, I don't think he even knows that is like, that he's going to ban the things he's advertising. Oh, he doesn't know it.
I'm sorry. So it's a really double-edged sword for me because I feel that TikTok is a social weapon that the Chinese government is using against the American people. Like, there's a lot of studies, there's a lot of videos you can watch about how their content is different in China, pro China, pro traditional family, pro. And then on the other side, when you look at it in America, it's pro LGBT, pro like everything to kind of degrade America. Traditional values over here. And it's very, very interesting. And you can see that they're using it as a political weapon. In addition to that, I think that there's also possibilities of spying and being able to harvest our data in all of these different security leaks. But my only issue is, as an American, I feel that we should have access to everything that we want. And we need to be an informed consumer and an informed American. And if somebody is so thick-skulled that they cannot see the threat, I don't think that we should take it away from them. I mean,
So this ban actually isn't going to shut it down.
right.
And this is an important detail that you're raising here. It would force the Chinese-based parent company that's been sucking up, that's just hoovering up all this data,
All the data.
and then
Mhm.
writing algorithms that are doing all the things you just said to push content, particularly onto young people. That is at the heart of many social ills now, and is they will have 165 days to sell the social media platform to a company that is not operating out of China, and if that does happen, uh, then that would actually put them under the legal regime, because right now Chinese companies are required to serve the purposes of the Chinese Communist Party in the state. They're required under Chinese law to do that. That would break this. What's interesting is it's actually a bipartisan group, and Senator Mark Warner, Democrat of Virginia, actually acknowledged today that he said former President Donald Trump was correct regarding the national security concerns over the social media platform TikTok. Now, to get a Democrat to admit that Donald Trump was right about anything and he says it is rare for me to say that Donald Trump was right. He said both in terms of obtaining data, but also think about the percentage. I think there are 170 million Americans who use TikTok. So I agree with you that I don't want people taking away options from us. And this doesn't necessarily take it away, but it does take it out of the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. And we'll see if that actually passes into law. Because I know that, could you imagine the Nazi Party being allowed to own a company that was being used to promote Nazism in the United States in, say, 1939?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I mean, there was American Nazis here. They held rallies in Madison Square Garden. I mean, when it comes to this TikTok thing, I genuinely feel it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we tell them that they need to offshore it away from China, because what's going to happen is they're going to sell it to some useful idiot Hunter Biden-esque person.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of people in the United States that would be equally as bad, but at least they would fall into the legal regime of the United States if they decide to take further action. Right now, the Chinese owned company can say, the hell with you guys.
Well, I mean, I would really appreciate if our legislators would go ahead and ban illegal secret Chinese police stations in the United States as well, while they're working on the TikTok thing,
as well as bioweapon experimentation facilities.
Yeah.
That would also be super awesome. And by the way, what about the places that are coming in financed directly by the Chinese Communist Party, operating inside of universities that have been financed for years, that went after people that were Chinese students who didn't want to follow the party line in China, and they went after them? What about that?
I don't know. I think that we, as a country, we have an absolute responsibility to protect people's rights while they're in this country, to protest against, to have the freedom of speech, to utilize that. And it's ridiculous that we have to worry about this in our country, but we do. So get involved, let your voice be heard, and start talking about this stuff, because we need every voice that we can. We need every hand that we can. So get involved.
So that means we did a special show today. We went a little bit past 7 here, but it was full of great stuff. And we also got to talk about the Young Republicans, the work they're doing, and how you can also make sure that others get involved in the Young Republicans. And they can do this by going to YRO.GOP. That's YRO.GOP. You'll be able to go and see the endorsements, and you'll be able to get information about who those folks are here very soon. Tomorrow's filing day, so I imagine you're going to be rolling that out very shortly.
Very shortly.
And we'll look forward to seeing all that. Stephen, thank you for being on here tonight. This was great. It was a blast.
I always love hanging out with you, Kevin. Give me a phone call anytime.
All right. Thanks everyone for watching, and we will be back with another episode of the Captive Audience tomorrow. I'm going to have Representative Jeff Helfrich on, talking about kind of doing a recap of the recent legislative session where Republicans actually we made some headway. We did some stuff, and it was good. And it's not a big celebration because we got an election coming up, and Democrats are afraid of losing. But we also showed what we could do by fighting. So we'll hear from Representative Helfrich tomorrow night. Did you have a last comment there, Stephen?
Yeah, I think you meant the YRO endorsed Jeff Helfrich.
Oh, right. Yes, exactly. Who is the leader of the Republicans in the State House. And so everyone, please tune in tomorrow. We'll have much more to share. And again, thank you for watching us. And thank you, Stephen, for joining me. We'll see everyone tomorrow night on the next episode of the Captive Audience. Good night, folks.